Today on the AllMomDoes podcast, who has a tween in the house or a teen? Or you know you're heading that direction and you want to make sure that you are ready for the battle. Well, I have the gal who's going to help us understand how to do that well. My guest today is Kari Kampakis. Thanks so much for joining me today, Kari.
Thanks for having me, Julie.
Now, you have gotten to do some really cool things in your career and in the parenting space. So give us a little background on you and how you ended up on the Today Show panel for parenting, all those really cool accomplishments.
Well, I'm a writer and a mom of 4 girls. We live in Birmingham, Alabama. And I guess it was in 2014, I released my first book for teen girls called 10 Ultimate Truths Girls Should Know. It was from a blog post that had gone viral. We turned it into a book. Thomas Nelson published it. 2 years later, released another book for teen girls. So that really kind of set me on a track of writing for teenage girls. My daughters were about to enter the teenage years at the time. And so that's, where my heart was. And anyway, just that experience allowed me to start meeting moms and girls all over the country and just start writing about topics that are near and dear to the hearts of girl moms everywhere. The Today Show, that was actually just a feature as a featured blogger one month. They had a challenge on raising kind kids. And so I'd submitted a story called Raising a Kind Daughter that had done really well on my website. And it was one of their most read blog posts that month. And so it got featured there. So that was exciting. And, I think that's one of the neatest things about writing for girls and girl moms is just seeing what resonates and seeing that really, no matter what part of the country you live in or what part of the world really, that deep down we all desire the same things for our kids. We want them to be kind. We want them to be strong. We want others to be kind to them. We just want to raise good human beings and, have those relationships in place. So anyway, that was the start of my journey writing for teenage girls. And of course, their moms were the ones buying the books for them.
Right.
And so I would go to these events and the moms would often say, thank you for writing this book. It's like you took the thoughts in my head and put them down on paper. And it's just so good to have this to share with my daughter. A lot of them would say, now, when are you going to write a book for us, for the moms? And that was where I would just smile politely. I'm from the South. And in my head, I'm thinking, never, I'm not writing for moms. Or it's a hard audience to write for. But I would just kind of, smile and think, oh, I'm not sure, maybe one day. But I really had no intention to do that. And it was really just the course of a few years, God worked in my heart. And, as I got to know these moms and really they'd open up to me, they share their struggles. I get so many emails with the struggles their daughters are going through. I see the joy on their faces as they introduce their daughters to me and also the sadness in their eyes as they tell me what they're going through at school. My heart started opening up to these moms. And then my daughters became teenagers. And I went through some, rough patches with each of them. I have 3 teenagers now and then 1 preteen daughter. And, God really used those experiences and a lot of the mistakes I made to soften my heart toward the moms of teenage girls. And I realized, when our kids are little, I think there's so much advice out there. You can talk to anybody to get advice or wisdom. And, when you have teenagers, you have to protect their privacy. Not everybody parents the same way or with the same values. So it's not like you can just ask anyone, what to do in a situation. So anyway, I wanted to create a resource where moms could not feel so alone and, share a lot of the mistakes that I'd made and just the things that I've heard over the years, because I do meet so many awesome moms. And I feel like I have learned so much from the other moms out there that I've been allowed to meet. That is, wisdom that I've tried to put into this book. Of just how to navigate those years. I just think we're in unprecedented times of parenting and our teenagers are facing so much. And as moms, we want to help them. So that's really what this book is about, is being that mentor and that guide, but also having that relationship while still being the parent, of course, which is hard to do, balancing it all.
Right. That tandem is really interesting. It's fascinating for me because you have 4 girls, I have 5, and the spread of age between my daughters is my oldest daughter is 16 and a half years older than my youngest daughter, who just turned 13. So we've got 4 teenagers still in the house. We are still in the thick of it, my friends. We are still, thank the Lord, we are not diagramming sentences because I just called a complete timeout on that. But we are still working on all the things. And so the thing that is very interesting to me right now, and I'd love to hear you speak to this, the world that I was raising my oldest daughter in, and the things we were facing in her teenagehood, there are variations on the theme. It's not that with Madison, I was dealing with things that, now with Mercy just seem completely off kilter in a different world. It feels like to me, though, with Mercy, my youngest daughter, there's been an amplification of all of the things that we were starting out with Madison several years ago, we were beginning to see the first waves of. Now, I was raised in an era where, in the 80s, it was kind of a wild and crazy time. And it was there. I can't say that anybody, was claiming to be a saint back then. But I
Right.
definitely knew with my friends, even with my friends who were not of any kind of faith, that we all had a desire to be seen as special and cherished. And when it came to dating relationships and all that kind of thing. And that's one of the things that I've noted in my daughter's generation, that I think that felt need is still there. But culturally, that is something that seems to be getting lost. What are some
Right.
things that you are noticing for our young women today, our tweens and teenagers, that is a shift that we all need to be aware of? Whether you raised a teen a few years ago and maybe now you've got a younger one, or you're looking ahead, or you came from a high school background and a college background just a handful of years ago, but now the landscape's changing. What are you seeing, Kari, that is different that we're going to need to make sure that we're equipped for?
I think the biggest difference probably between your older daughter and your youngest one is just technology and the introduction of social media. And that was really one thing I kept seeing over and over as I wrote this book, was how that shifted everything. I mean, that since then we've seen, suicide rates are at the highest level in 40 years for girls, and anxiety levels are through the roof. I have a friend who counsels teenage girls, and I think she used to see like 4 out of every 20 girls used to have anxiety, and now it's more 16 out of every 20 girls. And then, I read this recently and it just broke my heart that it said today's teenagers are the first generation of teenagers to be more stressed than their parents, except during the summer. And I just, I didn't have a perfect teenage experience, but we had fun. My friends and I, we loved each other. There wasn't all this pressure on us. And I just thought that just breaks my heart that what used to be this time of exuberance and this time to discover who you are and, to make mistakes or to fail if to chase big dreams. But if it doesn't work out, to bounce back and learn from those lessons. And now I think there's just a standard of perfection. They're scared to death to fail. They're scared to make a mistake. Any mistake they do make can be immortalized on social media. And what I see in my work, I really feel like the root problem, what's really the most hurtful and the hardest thing that girls are navigating, and their moms too, is relationships. I mean, I would say 9 out of every 10 emails I get is hurt feelings or drama or something going on in friendships with other girls. And it's usually with their best friends. And the moms feel so alone. And, I get phone calls, in my community, and they're like, I don't know who else to call. They think they're the only one. And I'm like, sadly, this is like common. I mean, I hear this over and over. There's this Harvard study. It said that the key to happiness in life is really warm relationships, that not having that can be as deadly as, smoking or alcoholism, as loneliness can be. And I just think that, we don't have those relationships in place. So my opinion is that these teenagers are dealing with really hard things, whether it's social media or pressures or just the expectations of the world, or just the culture that they're up against, which does not really value virtues and all the things we want for them as parents. They're up against so much. But if you don't have those warm relationships with your parents, with your friends, with your family, if you don't feel that connectedness, you don't really have people to talk you through it and walk through it with you. And I'm just a firm believer that, we can get through anything in life with God and with our people, with people who will love you through it no matter what you're going through. So I feel like that's, it's just that loneliness and that disconnect that they're really struggling with. And that's one reason I wrote the book, because I started thinking, I have such a heart for teenage girls. And I started thinking they can read my books. They can come to an event. Their moms will drive 5 hours sometimes to bring them to an event. And I'm just like, wow, a mother's love. We will do anything to help our kids if we think it'll be beneficial for them. But I started thinking, if they do that, that's a once a year thing for them to read this or come. But they're with their mom every day of the year. Nobody loves a girl like her mother. But yet you see this terrible narrative beginning when your kids are little, that just wait till she's a teenager, she'll be a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's just, and we buy into that script. And I think that, I don't know what the disconnect is, but if you go Google moms and teenage daughters, it's all negative. It's all dysfunction, fighting. And so I just think the enemy is really at work there. He doesn't want us to be close to our family members, to our daughters, because then we can help them. And so I had to work through that myself when I was going through some rough patches with my daughter. I discovered it was a lot of pride that was getting in the way of the relationship. And I had to really look at myself and think, how can I approach this differently? Still be the mom, but really look at this like she needs a relationship with me. She needs wise mentors and counselors in her life. And how can we build those bridges between the two generations so that we can help our teenagers?
Right. You bring up, and I think this is really interesting. Back when I was in college, there was a gal who made a bad decision at a party. There were pictures that were taken. And part of what I remember in that experience was, of course, in that day and age, you had to take film you had to be really intentional to be that exposing of someone. Like you had to decide to take the film to, your local Walmart and get it developed. And the thing that was cool was there was a group of girls who banded around her and figured out who had those pictures, who had the negatives, and shut it down. And it was able to be shut down.
Wow.
Today, you're so right. I mean, if somebody has a lapse of judgment, if someone makes a mistake, it can be immortalized for so long. And the other thing that I find that's interesting is it feels like we haven't done a good job training our girls on how to close rank around one another and protect each other. There seems to be a real ethos of the mean girl environment. How do we combat that? How do we help our daughters understand that sisterhood with other women is so important and that we need to be protecting each other, not exposing things when people make a mistake, not participating in some of the drama, because the drama can be addictive. I mean, we've got a whole culture built on reality shows and did you hear and did you see and posts going viral about things that people didn't know about and now they do. How do we help our girls acknowledge that that's a human impulse to see what's novel, to call something out, but at the same time also teach them how to sister well?
I think it goes back to those scripts and those narratives and it just really being mindful. I think we live in an age where we get on social media and you see something enough, you just start to believe it and buy into it. And one script I don't like is girls are mean. And I know, and I've been there as a mom, like somebody does something mean to your child and you are just like, what can I say to make her feel better? And it's just the low hanging fruit, like girls are mean. And it hit me a few years ago. I had a friend tell me that she's like, I really struggled with adult friendships because whenever something happened when I was younger, my mom was always like, she's just jealous of you. She's just doing this. But she said what it did is it really built this distrust in me against other girls. And I started thinking about that. And I think we do our girls a real disservice when we hand them these stereotypes. And it's like, all boys are jerks. All boys are not jerks. There are bad seeds, good seeds in any category. So I think it's just being mindful of, when they are hurt, instead of throwing out those stereotypes, girls are mean, because then we're saying you're mean, I'm mean, we're all mean. There's no hope for friendship. It's just really walking through them as they go through life. Like, yes, girls can be very hurtful. We live in a very mean culture. I don't think it's just necessarily a girl problem. I think it's a society problem that we're in a very mean age. But girls need each other. And I always tell my daughters, I'm like, you need your friends like I need my friends. Nobody understands what you're going through like I do. And I think one disservice we do to our girls is not teaching them how to work through conflict, not teaching them conflict resolution. Two girls get in a fight. Instead of talking it out, they go talk about it with everybody else. And then everybody gets on, picks a side and it creates all this drama. And you're just like, if you could just teach them to respectfully talk it out, a lot of times they can work through it and, at least get to a better place. And so just teaching them those conflict resolution skills. I mean, I think it just boils down to the love of Christ and how we're all sinners. We all mess up. We ask for forgiveness. We apologize. We do our part. But really that we do need each other, especially in an age like this, and knowing that, okay, if who's being picked on now? This girl's being picked on. It could be you tomorrow. You need to handle this the way you'd hope somebody would surround you. And I've learned too, just, when our daughters go through something hard as it is to watch them do that, sometimes they learn the best lessons because, if they're being ostracized from a group and then somebody comes up and is kind to them, all of a sudden it clicks. Oh my word. Next time somebody else gets ostracized, I'm going to be kind to them. They don't realize it's that empathy that they develop. So I just think it's having all those conversations and using whatever they're going through in life to teach them that, a win for one girl is a win for all girls, that you are in this boat together. Nobody understands your life like the people who are in your generation with you.
Right.
But it's hard. It's hard to teach those lessons.
We'll get right back to the interview in just a moment. Does your child need a new Bible for back to school? Or maybe you want to teach your child biblical values that will last a lifetime. The best-selling Adventure Bible is a great choice. It's the #1 Bible for kids, allowing them to take an exciting journey through each chapter with full-color illustrations, memory verses, hands-on activities, and more. The Adventure Bible is now available in 4 translations and is the perfect Bible to encourage your children to stay in Scripture. Visit adventurebible.com to find over 700 free games, activities, teaching resources, and more. Visit adventurebible.com today. I think one place where we've really had a deficit, and I began to identify it with watching the growing up of my daughters, and of course having sort of a multi-generational experience in watching that because of the age range of my girls, is I realized that my husband and I both realized that we were going to have to be very intentional in the culture in which we live to teach our girls how to be leaders. It seems like there's a lot of embedded language around our guys, almost an assumption that everyone has to be a leader in the way we define it. Now, Kari, I believe that everyone is a leader in some format. Right. But, when we talk about a born leader, we're so often talking about a male-centric definition of that. And I think part of why we slide into some of these stereotypes like mean girl and everybody picking on the one girl and all those things is because we've had a hard time teaching our young women how to stand and be leaders. Yeah. And I got to be honest, not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but I think our church culture has only exacerbated that. Like, we have had a really hard time showing women how to close ranks, stand well, and lead out in ways that are very powerful for the encouragement and exhortation of other women. So what are some things we can actively do to help engage our daughters in understanding that part of being part of the sisterhood, right, is leading well, is being the person in the crowd who will say, that's not cool, and I'm not going to forward that, or I'm not going to participate in this dialogue. And even if you, my peers, don't like it, I'm going to stand and stand well. How do we begin inculcating that into their experience?
Right. I think one of the best things we can begin to tell them is just think for yourself. There's such a herd mentality. And I know that, we can tell our girls all the lessons all day long, but, they get into the pressure cooker at middle school or high school, and sometimes they're just scared. It's self-preservation. They are just going along with the flow. And so I think, just teaching them, we can teach that early, think for yourself. Because I think, really, especially in middle school, you hear about girls, very smart girls. I don't want to take advanced classes. All my friends are taking regular classes. Or a girl's being mean to another girl and the whole group goes with her, not because they agree, but because they're scared of being outcast. And just really teaching them to think for yourself. Don't be scared to be the only one doing the right thing, because it's, you can never go wrong doing what's right. And, something else I really think we have to think about and be aware of is if we as moms are thinking for ourselves.
Right.
And I often think if we want our girls to be strong and to be leaders in that way of, like, whether one person's following you or nobody's following you or 10 people are following you, do what's right, what you feel is right. We've got to do that. And, I don't think we realize how much we fall into that herd mentality. And I'm as guilty as anybody. Like, well, everybody's doing this, or everybody's, buying these shoes, or everybody's doing that. And I think that if we are not mature enough to be able to think for ourselves and make different decisions than other families, then how are our kids ever going to see that, especially our girls, because we're modeling it. And I think sharing our mistakes sometimes, and it could be, I do that a lot with my children. Like, this one time when I was in college and somebody was talking about my good friend and I wanted to stand up for her and I didn't. And I regret that. But teaching them the power of, you might be in a situation and you don't feel strong enough to do it, but, really lean into that regret, because that's what could inspire you the next time to do the right thing. Or like you said, when you see somebody, I think sometimes seeing somebody stand up and do the right thing, sometimes that gives us the courage, like, ooh, next time I'm going to choose that route. I want to be like her.
Right. It sounds like, Kari, that a really integral part of loving her well, loving our daughter well, is being the woman that she needs to see. And this is a place that I think gets very interesting sometimes for a lot of us as women, because you touched on it earlier, that pride. And of course, pride is such a two-sided coin, right? Because on one
Right.
side is pride and on the other side is the insecurity. And we flip that thing back and forth. We're trying to hide the insecurity with developing some kind of pride. And then we're also insecure in our pride. I mean, there's just a whole mess that goes on there. But, when
Right.
I see the mom pushing her daughter to be something that the mom feels like she never got to achieve, or the mom
Right.
has never been able to effectively model in her own life, and yet she has this expectation of a daughter that is so far beyond what the mom has been able to do, willing to do, all of the things. So how do we do the internal work that we need to do to make sure that we are women worth following when it comes to loving our daughters well?
I've heard it said that we can only take our daughters as far as we've gone.
Oh, I
And
love that. That's good.
I think that's just a good motto to live by. Like, if we really want them to be these things, we've got to journey with them. And I think it's okay to tell them, like, I'm just walking a few steps ahead of you.
Right.
You're teaching me too. I'm growing here too. But I do think, just making those intentional efforts to, I think really just doing those heart checks and just really being willing to look at ourselves. And, one reason I did want to write this book was I start with a big mom fail. I'm crying on the floor. I've been in this lockdown with my daughter. We've been in a standoff for a few weeks, and I'm just, the guilt and the regret is weighing down on me. And it was hard for me to come to that point to like swallow my pride and look at myself. But that is really where our relationship started to turn around, and where God opened my eyes to a lot of things I had not been seeing. And you're right, pride. I think there's the pride of our children. Of course, we're proud of our children, and that's a good pride. But then there's that pride that makes us think that we're always right and everybody else is always wrong, like we're seeing in our society. So I think it is just really, breaking down, looking at ourselves, doing that heart work. I call it the heart work and the leg work,
Right.
to really look at ourselves and think, what we're doing wrong. I've heard it said that sometimes moms have a tendency to see their daughters as a chance to have a perfected version of themselves.
Right. Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
I think that's very true. And I think sometimes we need to really check it. Say if your daughter doesn't make a team and you are more devastated than she is, then that's kind of a time to look at yourself, say, why am I so upset? Is this really about my daughter, or is this about me?
Right.
And so I just think that we don't really realize the importance of going back and dealing with our old wounds and our old baggage until we have daughters that get to that age and we find emotions boiling up in us that's bringing back to mind some things we had gone through that probably need to work through also. And I had to do a lot of that writing these books for teen girls. I had to really kind of go and bury some of those things from my teenage years that, you look back, oh, it was fun, but then, you forget some of the sad and the hard things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We all have revisionist history when it comes to high school and college days. Yeah.
Right. And so, I had to really go back to really get myself in a place where I could relate to them. And it was my editor telling me, the first time I sent the manuscript, a few chapters, she was like, this is a good start, but you sound like a mom. And she said, if to really connect with these girls, she's like, you've got to sound like a wise big sister, or best friend. And so go back and just channel your teenage self.
Right.
And so that really, it forced me to go back and really look at myself and some of the insecurities that I had and why those insecurities made me do some things. But anyway, I think it helped getting to that place of empathy, of being able to relate to our daughters and just realize we're all human. We're really struggling with the same things, and we don't always master these emotions, whether it's jealousy or insecurity. We don't always master it, but we can get to a more evolved place. And I think that's the goal in life, and to teach our daughters how to do that.
Right. You bring up something that I think is really critical that moms take a hard look at, and it's a difficult thing to face, but it is this. These girls don't belong to us, and they are not further expressions of who we are. The greatest gift we can give our kids is to let them have their own lives. And I'm not saying release them too soon, and I'm not saying that we're not there, and I'm not saying that we don't guide and direct. Of course we do those things. Right. But the tension I think a lot of people feel in those tween and teen years is your teen grasping for independence is actually good and healthy. And your reluctance to honor that desire is indicative to me of the challenge you may be having, allowing them to have their own identity and to not be part of yours. Do you find that place of that messiness of identity is often at a core of the conflict that can arise between mothers and daughters?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I actually have a chapter where I talk about that, about we've got to have our own adult interests, our own adult lives. We've got to have friendships. And I think we talked about, I was raised in the 80s too. And we're kind of like, we were, I don't think there was any intentional parenting going on back then. So parents kind of did their thing. We did our thing. And so I think, I think the pendulum has definitely swung. Like our generation has grown up. Like we want to be more engaged in our children's lives. We want to be more intentional. And I think the intentions are good, but we can create such child-centered homes where they're the center of the universe and everything's riding on them. Our happiness is riding on them. And that's when our identity gets tied up in what they're doing or what they're choosing. And I think that is a dangerous place to be. And so, something happens and we're more upset than they are, and we can't even comfort them because we're so upset. So, I really do think our goal as parents is we're trying to be strong. We want to be a source of strength for them. We want to cry with them, but also offer that hope. Like, you're going to get through this. We want to be that strong voice in their life. But again, we've got to work through all of that with ourselves and not tie up our identity and their identity, and know that they are separate people. And as a friend of mine, I share this story too. She lost both of her parents within a few years. And I'll never forget her being in my kitchen. And I was asking her a few weeks after her mom died, how are you doing? I knew she was in a hard place. And she kind of teared up. And then she said, I realized recently that my parents spent their entire life preparing me for this moment. They were preparing me for the day when I would have to stand on my own 2 feet and do life without them. She's like, that's the gift they gave me. And it just hit me. And I thought, she's so right. Like we're preparing them for the day when we're not here, when maybe they can hear our voice in their head, but we're not here to guide them. And we want them to be independent adults. And we've got to, release them and let them have that freedom. And I do think that if we do that well, they'll want to come back to us.
Right.
If we're not clingy, if we're not, making their life about our life, then if we do it well and we're there to support and guide and mentor and just, call me anytime you need help, I think they'll come back to us. They'll continue to want our wisdom and our friendship and all of that. But if we are tying our identity into theirs, then maybe they might just want to set some boundaries as they get older, and we might not see them as often.
Right. I think they need us speaking over them, that we believe they are capable and strong, and that they can do this and they can live life. And if all we're speaking over them is, you don't know, you don't have the experience, you have no idea, you're naive, those things really aren't helpful. Those aren't the things that really help foster someone into a sense of their own adulthood. And that's where we need to be heading. That's the purpose, is the launch. And so I love that you bring that up. Now, talk to me about this, Kari. It seems to me that we need to develop a skill set, and we need to be able to show our daughters how to pick friends well. It's so, as you were saying earlier, who our kids are around is so important. And I think often we have really focused a lot on, do these kids have good morals? Are they running around and doing things they shouldn't do? And blah, 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 blah. But I don't know that we've done a very good job of saying, what are the characteristics, not just the moral behavior of someone, but the assets and the facets to someone who actually makes for a good friend. Because the reality is, your kid could be running around with some girls who seem to be the good girls, who don't seem to be going out to the parties or dating the bad boys or whatever, but they could be some of the meanest, nastiest girls ever. So how do we help our girls understand what it means to truly pick companions in life who are life-giving, who are iron sharpening iron, who have a different level to what we're looking for in terms of the relationships we surround ourselves with?
Right. I think the number one trait, and it can be rare to find, is just kindness. I know a kind friend might not be as exciting as a really fun, vivacious friend, but, a lot of times the fun friendships that are so exciting, they fizzle out. It's just to look for that kindness. And, what does kindness look like? Girls, especially as they get older, they're pretty smart. By high school, they kind of know different types of friends and different personalities, but they might say, well, she's really sweet to me, but I hear her talking about her friends a lot. I'm like, that's a red flag. If somebody's talking about other people, even especially her friends all the time, that you're not going to be safe in that circle. I also emphasize, I always say, cast a wide net. I think girls, especially in this day and age and on Instagram, they have, these are my peeps, these are my people. They get really interlocked into a group. I see this a lot at the high school level, at every school, that they have these groups, and a lot of times they might have formed in 7th or 8th grade, and people start making different decisions in high school, but the groups, people are scared to leave the groups even though they've outgrown it, because another group might not take them in and they don't want to be by themselves. And so they stay, surrounded by people that might not be helping them become who they're supposed to be because they're scared to be alone. It's better to start over and be alone and pick friends based on who's really good for you, who makes you feel good, who's going to help you live up to your potential, rather than staying in a group that might be toxic or unhealthy for you because you want that security of a friend group. But it's so hard because, their age friends are like oxygen. They just want to have those friendships. And I've met very few girls who have not gone through a hard season of friendship. And as hard as that is to even watch it as a mom, I really think that's where we learn our best lessons. Like, okay, now I want kind friends. Now I know why kindness matters and why speaking the truth and love matters. So I talk to a lot of girls that they have friends, their first friendships are kind of mean. Oh yeah, I used to go to school and she'd tell me I looked ugly in those jeans, but I thought that's what friends did. Like they don't really know that something better exists. And so sometimes they do have to go through those the not so good friendships to really get to that point of like, I'd never want that again. It's kind of like dating. I think the same thing. You got to go out with a few toes to be like, okay, I know that is what I don't want. So now I have a better idea of what I do want. What's the saying that water seeks its own level? And so, if they want kind friends, it really starts with them being that friend. And I think also teaching them to be proactive in their friendships. I think sometimes even as women, we look on social media, oh, I'm so hurt I wasn't invited. I never get invited to anything. And we forget that we have that power to go be that friend to somebody else. We have that power to reach out and invite them to go on a walk or to go to dinner. I was talking to this one girl who pledged a sorority. She knew nobody in her sorority, and she was from out of state. And she said, I just sat in the den of the sorority house, and I knew if I just sat there for a few hours, I would meet people. Like, she just put herself, and I was like, that is really smart.
Yeah, she proactive,
Yeah, in a place where she was going to meet people. And I think the more proactive we teach our daughters to be, make friends, whether you're at school or sports or church or camp, wherever you are, make a variety of friends. Not only will you be a better and enriched person because of that, but you're also more likely to find those friendships that are genuine and real and true.
Right. You can do some screening. It's fair. It's a good thing to decide who are going to be the people closest to you. Kari Kampakis, I'm so glad that you've been here with us. Love Her Well is the book. Kari, thanks so much for all of your insight today. I know that we are going to have a lot of moms out there raising girls who are going to be so thankful for the wisdom and insight that you've provided. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Julie.
Be sure and check out the show notes that our content coordinator, Rebecca, puts together each and every week. A big shout out to Donna. She is our producer and helps make sure that the audio quality and all the things are the way they need to be so that you can get the episodes. I would love to ask you a big favor. Would you do this for me? Would you go and subscribe and like the podcast wherever you get your podcasts? It really does help get the word out. And if you leave us a 5-star rating and a really sweet review, you might just get to hear your review read online here on the podcast. I would love to connect with you on all places social. You can find me, Julie Lyles Carr. I particularly love Instagram, so come see me over there. And while you're on the webs, be sure and check out AllMomDoes.com, which is our blog and website. It's an incredible resource for you. And of course, All Mom Does on the socials. And we also have the All Mom Does podcast discussion group where I check in and chat with you throughout the week about the episodes. So would love to see you there as well. I'll see you next time right here on the All Mom Does podcast.